Welcome back to Blockstream Talk. Today's conversation, our first conversation of 2024, is with the CEO and founder of JAN3, Samson Mow. A lot has happened since we last spoke with Samson, so we've got quite a bit to catch up on. 2024 looks like it's off to a really good start for both of Bitcoin's major Layer-2s. Lightning network capacity continues to hover around an all-time high, but Liquid has also really accelerated over the last couple of weeks and months. It looks like it could be on pace to even surpass the Lightning Network in the not too distant future. Samson, of course, has been busy meeting with policymakers and central banks from across Latin America, Asia, and Europe, and has also just released a really slick new wallet called AQUA, a Bitcoin and Tether focused wallet that integrates both of Bitcoin's major Layer-2s, Lightning and Liquid. And I think it's really the first wallet of its kind that's geared more towards mass market adoption than for power users. We also touched on the new American ETFs and the near-term outlook for mainstream institutional adoption. It's always great to talk to Samson. If you think we missed anything, let us know in the comments below. And as usual, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Samson, welcome to the show, our first podcast of the year. Who else could we have to kick things off for 2024?
It's been a while since I've been on, and I hosted you a couple of years ago.
That's right. Well, you're our pod father. You're the one who suggested this idea and created the podcast. So yeah, it's cool to circle back and have you on.
Great to be back.
So we've got a ton of stuff going on, and you've been super busy as usual, and a lot of stuff to talk about today. We've got, Bitcoin price has doubled over the last 10 or 12 months. We've got the halving not far away. We've got Bitcoin on both the Lightning and the Liquid network pushing new highs and starting to look like a hockey stick. We've got your new wallet from AQUA that looks really, really looks really, really slick. Jesse J and I were just talking about that before the podcast. And then you've been doing a ton of traveling as usual and talking to a lot of different global leaders and different markets. So we've got a ton of ground to cover today, I think.
Yeah, well, let's get right into it then.
Sounds good. All right, maybe to start off, I'm sure that everyone who is watching this podcast probably knows who you are, but maybe we could do a quick rehash on yourself and your journey to Bitcoin and how you became the CEO and founder of JAN3.
Sure, sounds good. So I'm Samson Mow. I'm the CEO of JAN3. And I guess my journey into Bitcoin first started way back in 2010, 11, when I first started reading about Bitcoin. And I got formally into the Bitcoin industry when I joined BTC China in early 2015. So I guess that is my journey from being interested in Bitcoin just by reading about it to joining the industry, working at an exchange. And of course, I stayed at BTC China for a few years. Did a little bit of stuff with the block size wars, and then I joined Blockstream for 5-ish years, and then here I am at JAN3. And I guess the question is, why JAN3, right? Because I was at Blockstream. And I guess the answer is because I wanted to focus more on nation-state Bitcoin adoption and reaching more people. So I wanted to focus 100% on this mission of accelerating hyper-Bitcoinization or accelerating Bitcoin adoption. And this is really why we launched AQUA. It's meant to be a wallet that serves the average user. And I think the product roadmap and product vision differs a bit from Green, which is more about power users and a lot of things that you can do, but maybe complex. So we can talk about a bit about that in the show too. But also just being able to focus full time on going around to different countries, meeting leaders, politicians, regulators, central bankers too, and talking to them about Bitcoin and trying to orange pill them.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I want to reiterate too, we talked about this last time, but people forget that BTCC was just a behemoth in the Bitcoin space back in the early days, not only on the exchange side, but on the mining side as well. You guys had this, was it half of global hash rate at one point, or just a really, really big number?
It was 18 to 20%.
That's massive. And you ran mining there too as well, right?
Yeah.
So, you've been doing a lot of traveling recently. What is your approach and what's kind of your pitch that you make to leaders when you're visiting them in these different countries? And how do you identify who might be good opportunities?
Right. Good question. So I would say we're very opportunistic at JAN3. We don't choose a target country and say, okay, we're going to go to, I don't know, Australia today, and we're going to work on Australia. We wait for some people in Australia, maybe some plebs that have an opportunity, have a connection to somebody that has a connection, because everyone's connected in some way through 6 degrees, and then they will help us make that connection, make that introduction, and then we arrange meetings, discussions, and eventually we will go there and see what we can do to orange pill them. And this is largely how it plays out for us at JAN3. So I've said it a number of times before, but we can't do what we do without the help of average Bitcoiners all around the world. And it sometimes can surprise people that they can accomplish a lot just by looking into their network and seeing who they can connect to and talk about Bitcoin. So I guess that is the angle of approach when we look at which countries orange pill. So it's countries that are ripe for discussions with and are receptive in some way. And then the second part of your question was, how do we actually approach the Bitcoin topic? And it's a interesting problem set that you have to solve, because you're dealing with people that may not necessarily be Bitcoiners. They might know a little bit about it, but maybe they don't. And then you also have a time constraint whereby maybe you have an hour with them in person, or maybe an hour and a half if you're really lucky, but it's not a lot of time. So your pitch, your elevator pitch, has to be very dense and targeted. So what we usually do is we just focus on alignment of incentives, because at the end of the day, it's all about aligning incentives. That's how Bitcoin works. So we ask them what they are interested in, and usually it has something to do with energy or financial instruments, and then we try to fit Bitcoin into what they would want and how it could help them. So maybe it is mining with flare gas and reducing emissions. Maybe it is tapping into untapped energy, hydro or geothermal, and mining Bitcoin to do other things like build airports or roads. So we really focus on what they are interested in. But what we don't do is go too far down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. We try to keep it very surface level and very accessible. So we don't talk about ultimate scarcity and going down that path of
hyper Bitcoinization.
Yeah, and talking about monetary theory and all those other things. We just talk about how Bitcoin could help them in the near term.
That's interesting. Actually, the way you just described how you kind of get in touch with these countries, that reminds me of how we met, because it was kind of a similar situation, right? Where I was working at a bank and I wanted to do stuff in Bitcoin. I was trying to, organize stuff with companies in the space and our investors. And I just reached out to you on Twitter. And that's how we set things up. And I said, hey, can you come to Hong Kong? We want to do this event at Macquarie's, regional office in Hong Kong. Can you come? He said, no, I can't, but we've got this guy, Adam, back. Would that be all right? And that's how we met and kind of built a relationship. And then, the CEO from Bitfinex was there as well. And so we had a chance to kind of build a relationship with Blockstream and Bitfinex, and Bitfury was there. So that was, it does seem like that's a really powerful way to move things forward, is finding people within these institutions that know the lay of the land and then can introduce you further. That's such a great way to do it.
Yeah, it's funny how things play out. And then now you're at Bitfinex Security. So it's kind of come full circle, all because we sent Adam as my replacement in Hong Kong.
That's right. So of all the places you visited over the last 12 months, maybe you can't say country names specifically, but regions, where are some of the most kind of receptive and least receptive? Jesse J and I, before the show, were just talking about all the action that's happening in Latin and South America with Argentina now and El Salvador. And I was talking about Africa, how there seems to be quite a bit of adoption there, but on the security side, we haven't had much traction over there, and it was, kind of a region that we're interested to exploring more about. Where do you think are the most receptive regions at the moment?
It's a mixed bag. It really depends on the people there and how good their understanding of the environment is, the macroeconomic environment and how the world works. So I would say by and large, Latin America is very ripe for Bitcoin adoption, especially nation state Bitcoin adoption. Africa is very interesting too, but the political stability in Africa is not quite there yet. I mean, you could even argue in Latin America, the political stability is not quite there yet in some places too, because there has been upheaval in Ecuador and some issues in Panama and Guatemala. So we keep an eye on all of that. But overall, I would say on a whole, Latin America is quite ripe for Bitcoin adoption. And you have El Salvador, they're anchoring that kind of Bitcoin lighthouse, saying, we are using Bitcoin as legal tender, and you could potentially do it too. And there's a very big influence from that drives people and especially governments in nearby regions to look towards them and try to emulate that success that they've had so far. So Latin America is very interesting, but we also have a good foothold in Europe as well, in Montenegro and potentially Serbia and the associated regions with the former Yugoslavia, because we have Prince Philip on our team. So he opens a lot of doors for us in that region. So right now there are some pretty good discussions going on there, but they will take time because, as you know, it's not easy for people to grasp what Bitcoin can do. But we did meet with the Prime Minister of Montenegro, and he was very receptive. And the conversation we had was at a very, very sophisticated Bitcoin level, I would say. So he knows about all this stuff. He's a finance guy, and he's been following it and understands a lot of what Bitcoin can do. We also were in Suriname recently too. It's in South America on the right side, and not many people know where Suriname is. And there's a I don't know. Do you know where it is?
Well, I've talked to Maya before as well. I think you were there with her, so that I did before my call with Maya. I had to Google it and figure. I did not know previously. It's a name that I'd heard of, but I didn't know. I had to Google El Salvador the first time, and it does expose a lot of like kind of missing holes when you go on some of these trips. I mean, when I joined and the first time I went to Kazakhstan, I didn't know much about Kazakhstan. It's in Central Asia. It's this huge country. All the countries around it are huge, and I knew nothing. So no, I had to Google Suriname as well.
But it's funny, just on a tangent, how Bitcoin takes us to odd places that we wouldn't have gone to. Like, if I met you, 20 years ago and said, Jesse, would you go to Kazakhstan? You'd probably say, no way in hell. Like, where is that, right? If you asked me 20 years ago, would you be in Suriname? Where is Suriname? But yeah, probably not, right? So Bitcoin is a very interesting mechanism where it pushes you into new places and new experiences. But yeah, but going back to that, we met the CEO of the national oil company there, Satsoli, and he gave us. I was there with Ben Van Hool, our COO, and he gave us his business card. And on the back of the business card is actually a map of South America, and it shows you where Suriname is. So I think they also have the same problem where people don't know where Suriname is. So they kind of had to show you where it is on their business card, which is kind of funny.
That video of you guys on the boat, it looks like if you fell off that, you would get eaten by a snake.
Well, it's a dangerous job orange pilling governments and going to all these countries.
All right. So it sounds like Latin America is probably, where a lot of the attention is still focused then. Is that correct?
Yeah. And there's a ton of opportunity too, because if we go back to Suriname, we met with the central bank there, and we gave them a proposal to buy Bitcoin with their reserves and put 1% into Bitcoin. And we're still in discussions, and we'll see if they actually do it while the price is low. We met with the president. We again met with Satsoli, their oil company, and they have newly discovered oil offshore, and there's a big drive to develop that, and they're already sourcing partners and investors to do so. But there is an opportunity there to work with them to potentially tokenize some of their shares and distribute those to the citizens of the country too. That's an initiative that they wanted to do, and that's a big opportunity. It's sort of like the Bitcoin bond, right? I think El Salvador was thinking to do the Bitcoin bond so Salvadorans abroad could invest back into the country. And this is sort of along those lines. They were talking about tokenizing equity in the national oil company and giving that equity to the people. So you could have shares of Satsoli in your Blockstream Green or your AQUA wallet or any AMP wallet. And that would be a big change too. So there's a lot of these kinds of projects that are possible now, or even capital raises to build new energy infrastructure. Like there's a big hydro dam project there that they could raise capital to build out and then mine Bitcoin. And there's an existing hydro project too that has excess power. I think something along the lines of 5 megawatts excess. And it's just a matter of finding enough time and bandwidth to execute on all these different projects. But my point is there is so much opportunity for Bitcoin to transform countries like Suriname, El Salvador, and many more in Latin America if they're willing to learn about the broader Bitcoin ecosystem and what it has in it.
And how important to the pitch is the energy aspect and Bitcoin mining? Because I think, if you look at, I'm sure a lot of these countries have, other coins and tokens, people flying around and trying to visit them and pitch them. But the Bitcoin mining part is kind of a unique part of the Bitcoin value proposition. And a lot of these countries, whether it's in Africa or Latin America, like you mentioned, they tend to have a lot of natural resources that they struggle to monetize. And the mining is kind of a unique way to do that. So how big of a hook is the mining, do you think, in getting people to understand this?
Well, I think mining is very powerful because it allows them to tap into these stranded resources or untapped resources in some cases. And if you look at the entire world, many of the poorer countries are actually energy rich. They just can't put that energy into a barrel and ship it across the ocean. But with Bitcoin, you can kind of do that. You can put it into a digital barrel called a BTC and ship that anywhere in the world, and with very low cost compared to a physical barrel of oil on a boat. So it's very transformative. And part of that pitch that I give is that the equation of money has changed now. So money is now energy and information. So if you have energy, then you can turn that into information and sell that and build whatever you'd like to build: hospitals, bridges, roads, high-speed rail, whatever you like, whatever you need. And I try to drive home the point that it's somewhat irresponsible not to do that, or at least look into doing it, because you basically have energy under your feet, right? Just like you have oil under your feet. If you didn't tap into that and you're still struggling with debt to the IMF, or your country is still in poverty, then something is wrong here. So we have to see if we can make them understand that transformation has happened and to take action on that and do something.
And what do you think the state of sovereign Bitcoin mining is? Do you think there's more countries mining Bitcoin than we're aware of?
Yeah, well, one good example is Bhutan. So they've been mining for years, and recently, when I think they were outed through some legal case, I forgot which one it was it BlockFi or something else, then they kind of owned it and said, yeah, we're mining Bitcoin, but we didn't even know for years, right? And then there's Oman that is also mining Bitcoin. I think they have a partnership with Marathon. And they have I forgot how many megawatts, but it was a sizable number of megawatts. But there are probably more countries out there mining. Sovereign Bitcoin mining operations are at work, and we just don't know about them. And that is probably a reason why hash rate is just going hockey stick right now. Because if you're behind the meter, it doesn't really matter what the price is of the energy. And a sovereign nation is behind the meter. Like, they don't have to meter it, right? They just tap it and use it. Whereas, if you're Core Scientific or somebody, then you have to buy it from the grid, or maybe some mining operations have their own energy production, but that's another topic. But it's different for sovereigns. They can just use all the power they want.
Yeah, and given the IMF's attitude towards Bitcoin, that if you're one of these kind of like developing countries, you're incentivized very strongly to not talk about your Bitcoin mining. It makes economic sense to do it, but it also makes sense to be very quiet about it too.
Yeah, the IMF is definitely a consideration, because a lot of these countries are in debt, and they do need to renegotiate and keep the IMF kind of happy. But I think that the looming fear of the IMF kind of like going after you or being unhappy with you is passing, because they did saber rattle a lot when El Salvador implemented their Bitcoin law and other things like the digital securities laws. But they've largely quieted down because El Salvador succeeded on a lot of fronts. They've got tourism to 30% growth. They have double-digit GDP growth. They have massive amounts of investment coming in. Their traditional bonds are rallying. So it's not like the IMF can say that much anymore about Bitcoin adoption by countries. So I think it makes it easier for any subsequent country to do something. And I think you mentioned Argentina before, but Argentina, I think they're almost done with their renegotiations. So once that is settled, I think there is an opportunity for Argentina to do something, because when Milei took office, he did preface and warn people like turning this country around is going to take 20, 30 years. But if you could accelerate that to 5, 10 with Bitcoin, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, Argentina is a really, really, really interesting one. I mean, Jesse J and I were talking about this as well before the podcast. That, when people were leaving Europe in the 1900s, Canada, Argentina, and Australia were all equal choices. They just kind of, picked one and then went. And then, it kind of fell apart over the last 100 years. And to see it'll be really interesting to see if they certainly have the natural resources, to see if they can turn it around. I think this will be a really, really interesting data point. Kind of like El Salvador is such an important proof of concept. If we can get El Salvador right and we can get capital markets going in El Salvador, and they've already done so much of the heavy lifting on their own to tackle crime and make it safe and a safe place for investment. And you see that money coming back into it. It's just a really powerful proof of concept for the rest of the world that can help accelerate things globally.
It really is. I'm not sure. Did you listen to Malay's speech at the WEF?
I did. I listened to the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay, I listened to part of it, but it was good. I'm pretty sure the rest of it was good too. I listened to the first 10 minutes or so, but he was saying like collectivism is what plunged 100 years of collectivism is what plunged Argentina into these financial dark ages or economic dark ages, and opening it up, being welcoming to investments, having free markets is what's going to fix things. And he did give that little bit of history, like when they were first, but before they went collectivist, it was very capitalist, and that was what you're touching on about how Argentina was one of those countries that people would just choose and go to because it was a good place. I think it's the Paris of South America.
Well, not to dip into Canadian politics, but this is my worry for Canada: is it becomes a cold Argentina, and I think we're on that path like already. And there's a brain drain out of Canada. There's a ton of people from Canada moving to El Salvador. I met a ton when I was there. So it could happen. It's not like it couldn't happen. Two countries with kind of a similar start.
There's a definite strong parallel between Argentina and Canada. Canada's just a little bit late to the game, but going strong on the collectivism front. And I was watching this TikTok video or something where they had a guy an immigrant from Bangladesh in Canada working at Tim Hortons, and he was saying this country is so effed up, and he told the guy filming, there's a university professor that comes in every day and he's homeless. And then you read the news, and Trudeau wants to give a stipend to people from Ukraine that come to Canada, and the total package is $500 million. So it's that same type of market force that drove Argentina into hyperinflation that is working its way in Canada now. And hopefully we can turn the tide with that. But holy, that's like, it just boggles the mind that people can run a country into the ground on this level, given the amount of education and resources that they have at their disposal to read and study.
No, it's just squandering everything. Yeah, and the lack of upward mobility. I met an older gentleman in El Salvador who's Canadian. He was an entrepreneur, and he said, he told his children, "Come move to El Salvador." He said, "You can come here and start a business and get it up and ready. You can make $15 million. You are not going to make $15 million in Canada under any situation. There's no possible universe in which that could happen." Starting from kind of like a normal person. And that really resonated with me because, I left Canada as well. And I don't think I'd have the degree of upward mobility in my life that I had here if I had stayed in Canada. So it's kind of a depressing situation, but I think a real opportunity for places like El Salvador.
Yeah, you could have been a manager of Tim Hortons.
That's right. Well, I mean, I drink a lot of coffee, so that wouldn't be bad either.
Yeah, it's not bad.
All right, so shifting over to AQUA, I had a bit of a fiddle with it, and I really liked it. It seems easy to use. I use Liquid a fair bit. I don't use Lightning that much. When I went to El Salvador, you had to get a Lightning wallet. You got to load that up and do some transactions over there. So I moved some, Lightning, some from my Lightning wallet to the AQUA one. Everything it works really well. It seemed really really smooth. So what are some of the key features there and improvements for the AQUA wallet, and how do you think that fits in driving, your hyper Bitcoinization strategy? And can you take credit for the uptick in LBTC that we've seen recently?
I don't know. Hard to say. Maybe that's just like the. Did you see that commercial? I forgot who made it. It was the baby pressing that terminal, and they had a picture there of side swap, and they had Adam Back calling the factory saying, "We need the."
Yeah, I saw that. That was a good one. Yeah.
That was a good one. I don't know. It's hard to say who's driving the volume. Maybe it's AQUA. Maybe it's Bolts.
Well, it's probably all of the above. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably all of the above, but or just necessity, because people are now starting to understand, well, maybe it's good to have a layer that's not the main chain when you need to, top up your Lightning channels, because, Lightning is very tightly bound to main chain, right? If main chain fees are anything more than $5, then it kind of makes Lightning very broken. And having this intermediary layer to bounce down on and come back out is very, very useful.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So what are some of the key features that you rolled out in the wallet? Like, how would you differentiate it from Green? I think in the beginning you mentioned that Green is definitely more for power users. I think that's probably my feel as well. How would you differentiate the two in terms of features and just the feel of it?
Right. So the core segments of AQUA are, one, we have to give users a lot of utility, and this is why we're integrating a lot of different services. So we're adding ways to swap between USDT and LBTC, and then to BTC. We have the ability to do submarine swaps to Lightning, so you can go in and out of Lightning. We have Sideshift powering swaps for USDT on all the chains, so you can receive from Tron, Ethereum, Tether transactions and send out also, but you keep your funds in Liquid USDT. So that sort of utility is the core foundation of AQUA, that you have to be able to move in and out freely. So in the words of Bruce Lee, be like water. You want to channel the turbulence and let people move things where they want to move them. The second key component of AQUA is the marketplace, and it's just spinning up. So we don't have that much there right now, but we will have a lot of on and off ramps in all these different countries for fiat. So that will be coming over the next few months. But if you look at the whole thing, the value proposition for an AQUA user is that this is your daily driver. You can get this and use it for all your spending, bill payments, grocery shopping, you name it. And you can travel to Latin America with it and interface with the USDT economy there. And I would say a lot of Bitcoin wallets seem to neglect that. They just make themselves a really good Bitcoin wallet, but all they do is send and receive Bitcoin and maybe buy Bitcoin. But you cannot say like USDT is not valuable, because the market says it is. There's billions and billions of dollars, like 80 some odd $billion of USDT right now. And a lot of that is just people in developing countries in the global south using it to protect themselves. And they haven't, even though they're using all this stuff, like they're able to make a transaction, they know what an address is or have a pretty good idea of what an address is, they're not necessarily Bitcoiners. And this is what we're hoping to change by making a Bitcoin wallet that has USDT in it. So we can get some of those hundreds of millions of people into Bitcoin. And we had a critique before when people said, why do you have the Bitcoin price at the top of AQUA? That's because in this target market here in LATAM, we want them to learn about Bitcoin. And we label the Bitcoin on-chain wallet as your saving account. And then the bottom is spending with Layer-2 and Tether. So the idea is that we educate them that Bitcoin is savings technology, and here's the price, and keep an eye on it that way. So I guess that kind of encapsulates how we differ from other wallets, and where we would put ourselves in the marketplace. And yeah, we are based on GDK, just like Green is, but we want to deliver a more targeted user experience. So there's a lot of things that we remove. So in Green, when you receive a liquid asset, it'll just show up. In AQUA, we only let you see the ones that you've added, and right now the defaults would be, LBTC Layer-2 and USDt. So you'd have to manually add something else if you want to see it. And the reasoning behind that is to keep it very simple for our target end user. And I think that is very important, because you can add a lot of stuff, and a lot of people want a lot of stuff. Like people are saying, "Oh, about hardware wallet support in AQUA, or Nostr, or um, connecting to my own Lightning node." And this is all really cool stuff, and there are wallets that do it really well. But I don't think that's what we want to focus on, because we want to just get people onboarded into Bitcoin Layer 2 and Tether on Liquid.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, it feels like that's Green's kind of niche, is to cater more to the power users. But definitely having something that's super simple and super basic and just getting the user numbers up is something that we really, really need as well. I've always been kind of USDT on Liquid works so well. It's so fast and it's so cheap. And I still don't think most of the market you can see that the market doesn't understand that, because Liquid as percentage of USDT is tiny, right? It's all on Tron. But it's cheaper and faster it's just a better product. And the problem is there just hasn't been enough integrations, and we just don't have the numbers yet. So I hope this is one of those products that will help change that. I think there's a real opportunity for it.
Yeah, and I would say it is coming, because, one, we have some ad campaigns going out in Latin America that are comparing Liquid to Ethereum and Tron, and we show the price to send USDT on Liquid is like 10 cents or something like that, and then Tron is like $1. Most Tron wallets charge $1, even though the Tron fee is lower, and then Ethereum's like 12-13 bucks a transaction or something like that. And then those can also fail too, and you lose your money. So I think with that push, we should start educating some of those people. And at the same time, we can work with the AQUA model of that marketplace and drive people to support Liquid Tether, because we'll tell them, like, we want to add you to AQUA, but you need to support Liquid Tether. And that's also a criteria for not Latin America, but other places too. When we engage with people interested in being in the AQUA marketplace, we tell them our priority is, one, you support Liquid, and two, your integration is straightforward and APIs are easy to use. And then that makes it easier for us to get more companies to support Liquid.
What are the pushbacks you get on Liquid? Like, if we had, we should make Liquid FUD dice. I think that would be great. What do you think, if we're making Liquid FUD dice? What would you put on the FUD dice?
I don't know. It's difficult to say, because the FUD doesn't make sense. That's the problem, right? It's sort of like the Bitcoin FUD about Bitcoin boiling the ocean. It's just not true. So I guess one of the Liquid FUD points is it's a federation. But then people love federations. Like, they love Fedi. They just don't like that Liquid is this federation. And I think it has to do with Fedi being new, and people are okay with it now, right? But technically it's the same thing. A federation is a federation. Liquid Federation is Bitcoin companies and exchanges. A Fedi federation might be, you and, I don't know, pick a couple other guys.
That doesn't sound ideal. Yeah.
It's different, right? Like,
Yeah.
Liquid is all about being a piece of Bitcoin infrastructure. So you have exchanges and Bitcoin companies running their functionary, the block producer, in data centers, versus Fedi. And I'm not sure how they do it or how it will be done, but what is the uptime? Is it some guy running a node in his basement? What if he has a power outage? I don't know. It's a different set of trade-offs, right? Like, yes, they're your buddies, but I don't know how good your buddies are going to be at running 24/7 uptime hardware.
Yeah, I like the idea of a federation that's kind of anchored by people, cypherpunk companies that are well capitalized, like Bitfinex and Blockstream. I think to me that seems their ideology is pretty much in line with the users, and that seems like a pretty good way to go.
Another FUD is Liquid's not layer two. Like we get that a lot because in AQUA we label that wallet layer two because it's Liquid and Lightning, and people keep saying it's not layer two because it's federation. But I mean, we were calling Liquid layer two probably before they even came into Bitcoin, right? This is 2015, and we've been talking about Liquid as being a layer two for getting close to a decade. So a lot of the FUD is just misinformed or people just irrationally angry, and we call that liquid derangement syndrome.
LDS.
Yeah,
Lightning adoption has, been up and to the right all this year. And that's been driven, I guess, partly by this high fee environment. Do you think that better interoperability with Liquid and Lightning can help in certain areas?
definitely. This is another thing too. I think people have this misconception that Liquid competes with Lightning, and anytime we say something critical about Lightning, they say, you guys are Blockstream shills and you're just fighting Lightning. But they kind of also forget that Blockstream has invested a massive amount of capital into Lightning
Yes.
infrastructure development too, and is one of the main implementations. Right? It's LND, CLN, and then I think the one from Eclair Async. Right? So it doesn't make any sense. And if you look at it, Liquid and Lightning are very um, useful in interacting and working with one another. And I think that is why, yeah, they're very complementary. And this is why Blockstream worked on both things at the same time, Liquid and Lightning. There was a post a couple weeks ago by Ben Carmen, and he was saying, well, it'd be brilliant if there was some simpler layer that Lightning interacts with and can bounce off of because, main chain makes it very difficult to use Lightning when fees are high and there's congestion. Well, yeah, Blockstream and Adam and the guys figured that out in 2015, right? So I think people will come around to it, and if the market is any indication, they're definitely coming around to it, right? So we had a lot of people give very positive feedback on AQUA, saying, "Well, it works really well because we're using bolts to do submarine swaps into and out of Liquid, and you're outsourcing all that complexity, channel management, channel rebalancing, all of that stuff to a professional service, and you're doing it in a trustless manner." So I think we can offer the best of both worlds. We offer that Lightning experience, but with the simplicity of having Liquid, which is just, you have the Liquid Bitcoin and that's it. You can sit there in your wallet, you can put it into a hardware wallet like a Jade, and there's no need to worry about the other side force closing the channel on you. And that reminds me, there's another little tidbit of liquid derangement that's really good, saying you have to trust the Federation. But I was running just through some experiments with other Lightning wallets at the outset, and I think it was Phoenix wallet. It's a really good piece of tech, right? And I like to use it. But when you buy a channel from them, first of all, they charge 1%, and then they also promise you that they will keep that channel open for at least a year. And I saw someone ask a question like, well, how do I know you're going to keep that channel open with me? And they said, well, we'll sign a commitment and we'll commit to it, but you have to trust us. So in anything other than main chain Bitcoin, you always have some degree of trust because, it's not Bitcoin at layer one where it's completely trustless. There's always some dimensionality to that. And the question is, do people realize that? And I think people are starting to realize it. And the high fees, congestion, all of that, maybe it's a good thing because it's forcing them to learn and challenge their own preconceptions or assumptions on what a layer two is and what Liquid is and what a federation is.
What about the other layer twos like ARC and Fediment? Do you have any plans to integrate those into kind of your nation state adoption strategy, or is there already kind of a lot on your plate already and it's difficult enough to get people to digest Liquid and Bitcoin?
Yeah, I would say it's difficult enough to just deal with what we've got right now. And Liquid is very good for securities issuance, right? With services like AMP, you can be like El Salvador and issue a Bitcoin bond, or Suriname, or fingers crossed, Argentina. But yeah, like there's enough things for us to work on and build on top of right now that we don't need to focus too much on technology that does not yet exist, right? And I think Fedi is good tech, but again, it's not meant to be super robust. I think it's meant for communities. But if I was advising a country on securities issuance, I would definitely say build on Liquid and use what's there because it is battle tested. It's been running for 8 years or so. And you have a ton of issuances on there already. You have Tether, the largest stablecoin in the world, the most dominant. You have $200 million of promissory notes from Mifiel. You have the Blockstream mining note. You have EXO. I would say it's a proven battle tested technology for securities.
Yeah, definitely. I was just checking on the Blockstream mining node. I mean, we're almost at 1,000 days in the Blockstream mining node, so it's already been out there, in the wild as well. People trading it on Telegram, peer to peer, and all like in a compliant way because of the whitelisted ecosystem. So for securities, I definitely think it's the leader in the industry.
I'm waiting for all the Bitfinex securities to come out.
I was going to segue into that, into a plug here. But yeah, no, we're going to be announcing that the El Salvador platform will go live in the next couple of weeks, and I think you'll see a lot more happening on the security side as well. We've got a pretty good pipeline there, so I think that's really exciting. So definitely sign up now to the platform. You can actually sign up to the El Salvador platform now if you go to the verification tab in Bitfinex, but we're going to start kind of announcing that and banging the drum over the next couple of weeks. And then I think we'll start seeing more issuances come to market. So it could be a really exciting year, I think, for Liquid, for Lightning, for all of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you saw it, but Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, was talking about tokenizing and digitizing all these legacy assets. So we just have to get on a call with the guy and tell him, use Liquid.
We do, but I'm kind of like, these guys, because, Hong Kong has been doing a lot of security tokenization as well. And then when you start to dig into the stuff that these big banks are doing, it's not tokenization as we understand it. A lot of it looks it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it looks a lot like the legacy system. Like not a lot is changing. They want innovation, but they don't want anything to change. I think basically what key part of their motivation is they want to fire their back office, right? So they want operationally for it to be cheaper and more efficient so they can fire more people and get their margins up. But, the BMN, you pull it off the platform, you can self-custody it, you can trade it peer-to-peer. I'm not sure that this is the vision of tokenization that they necessarily have. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I do feel like it's a little bit of a race between what they see as tokenization and maybe what we see. I'm sure some degree of it will be complementary, but I think we have to see what's going on.
Well, it's there for us to win that battle, right? Like they can definitely go off on their own path and use some private blockchain, but I think if we can engage with them, maybe that's what they want, but I think it's better to go back to something like Liquid and restoring the bearer notes of past, right? And bearer shares. And I think that's a better way to do it. Like being peer-to-peer, trading peer-to-peer is better than just, tokenizing, but it's in a database.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good segue to the next question I wanted to ask, is that we've got this sharp uptake in institutional interest in Bitcoin-based security products again. So, I mean, I've got mixed thoughts on the ETF. In some ways, I understand that there's mandate restrictions and that there's regulatory restrictions, and a lot of these large institutional investors were difficult for them to buy Bitcoin directly. At the same time, I find it slightly disappointing that they absolutely have to have it spoon-fed to them, that it needs to be not only securitized, but it has to be securitized in the US. Having an ETF in Canada is not enough. They don't want to buy that. It has to be securitized in the US for them to want to touch it, let alone going out and buying, wild Bitcoin. So what are your thoughts on the ETF? I saw that you made some interesting comments, like it was in an article, I think, I can't remember which one, but it said that it might trade at a discount or a premium to real Bitcoin, to wild Bitcoin, maybe kind of similar to the way the GBTC did for most of its existence. Why do you think it'll do that? Why do you think there'll be premiums or discounts?
Well, it's to be seen, but what it comes down to is ETF Bitcoin is going to be encumbered in a number of ways. So it depends like what exactly all happens, but you can have some rules or regulation whereby you cannot redeem and exit the system. Or, well, right now it's not an issue because it's cash creates, but let's say there is in kind, right? I think I wrote this commentary before when in kind was still at play, but they could just say, you can withdraw Bitcoin, but you can only withdraw to another authorized financial entity or something like that. And there is precedent for this. I think in the UK, they're saying you can only withdraw from one exchange to another exchange. And if that happens, what that means is this Bitcoin all becomes walled off from rest of world. So I called the rest of world Bitcoin free Bitcoin, and this is institutional Bitcoin in this bucket. And maybe it can't leave. And I don't think that will have as much value and utility as the free Bitcoin. So that would, in theory, mean that there would be two prices for Bitcoin when it's trading. So this one, the encumbered one, would trade at a discount, and the free Bitcoin would trade at a premium.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Max Kaiser has been making that point as well, right? It's kind of like wild Bitcoin and zoo Bitcoin. Yeah. It's like, because you get the economic some of the economic benefits of Bitcoin where it number go up, but you don't get all the useful parts of it, like the self-custody, the, censorship resistance, all of that stuff that's really important, especially, for different parts of the world where there's all kinds of restrictions on currency movement, and transactions are monitored, and you might be a political dissident or whatever. So there's all of those kind of discrepancies. But I mean, that's kind of the difference between, I think, probably Bitcoin usage in the global south and then in the G7, where it's basically just another speculative asset, and it's largely for people with money to kind of speculate on.
ETFs are kind of a money making vehicle, right? Especially the structure they have right now. It's like invest your fiat, make some fiat. So that's already what it is. So we'll see what happens. But I would hope that people invest into the ETFs because they need to put their 401k or whatever, and they need that vehicle to access it through this channel. But that they also learn about it and they buy some free Bitcoin or real Bitcoin, wild Bitcoin, and keep it for themselves. Because if you look at history is full of gold being seized for various reasons, most typically and most commonly for war. So it's actually very easy now for your Bitcoin to be seized if it's sitting in an ETF because it's not yours, right? So, suddenly there's a new executive order to finance World War III, and sorry, we need your Bitcoin, But sadly, people don't like to learn from history, so we'll see what happens. But I hope a subset of those people do learn about self-custody and what real Bitcoin is, and they do buy some on their own.
Yeah, I think optimistically, the ETF could be a Trojan horse, right? I think this happens to a lot of people. You buy a little bit. I heard that Kathy Wood has 25% of her wealth in Bitcoin. It probably started off, and people were talking, "Wow, that's amazing." Yeah, but the price has doubled. It probably started at 1%, right? I think that happens to a lot of people, right? You put in 1 or 2%, the number goes up. All of a sudden, it's meaningful, and you become very interested in it. And then you start doing more work. And I think that's kind of the Trojan horse effect of Bitcoin. And I hope that's what happens with the ETFs. And the other good thing is that, how many Bitcoin did the GBTC have? Like 600,000 or some crazy number, 700,000. It's probably better for that to get split up. And it looks like, given their outflows every day, it looks like that's what's happening.
Yeah, I really think they should lower their fees. But at the same time, it's good they're not lowering their fees because that's driving this dispersal of their BTC holdings into other funds and other vehicles. But at the end of the day, they're all still American securities. So you have to understand there is seizure risk right there.
Definitely. Yeah. The other thing with the GBTC is their fees, used to be 2%. And I think that was generated by selling Bitcoin. So it was, 2% of a couple 100,000 Bitcoin downward pressure every year. So, it's good to clear that out as well.
Yeah. I love the answer he gave when he was asked, the CEO, do you think your fee is justified? And he just said, yeah, I think we're worth it. It's like the L'Oreal commercial, because you're worth it.
Yes, that's right. All right. Well, we could talk like this all day. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Maybe to wrap things up, what are you looking forward to most in 2024? And where do you see JAN3 and Bitcoin in maybe 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, 2024, we have a lot of meetings planned. A lot of it is follow through with previous meetings and countries we visited already, and then potentially a few more. We're trying to get a meeting with Malay, but I think it might be realistically more in Q2. We'll see. But yeah, that's 2024. I think is going to be a big year for Bitcoin. Right now, as we are speaking, Bitcoin price is down to, I don't know, 0.41 ish or something like that million. But I think this will pass, and people will start to get excited again. And if you look at all of the trends of the ETF, they are increasing, right? Inflows are increasing, and the amount that they're accumulating per day is just crazy when you look at it. It's like thousands of Bitcoin a day. So this cannot keep up with the price being this low. I just think it's an impossibility. So we'll see the price go back up in 2024. And with price going up, number go up, we see more interest. And that helps us on the nation state adoption front, because nobody wants Bitcoin when it's 16K, right?
Nope.
You got to be crazy to want Bitcoin at 16K.
Yeah.
You want Bitcoin at 100K. That's when it's beautiful. Right. So this will help us on getting more connections and introductions to meet with more world leaders and orange pilling them. And it's going to be a virtuous cycle where as price goes up, as we see more adoption, it just keeps on going.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's Year of the Dragon too, so that has to be good.
Yeah, let's see.
All right, great. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Samson. And I think we'll have to do these more frequently going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it.
Great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too.